we get closer to countdown, we're in the second week of the countdown to kickoff from the Pink Seats podcast. Jacob Lane, Matt McGavic, just us two as we roll along into week 2. We've got a great guest joining us in Steve Clarkson. Fascinating topics to talk about when you're talking about Pierce Clarkson, who really kind of kicked off this, new wave of Louisville football, if you will. Really kind of got the ball rolling to where we are. And then you talk about the quarterback position, the quarterback retreat. We're going to talk a little bit about that, which is a fantastic event that Steve has been putting on for years, that the top quarterbacks across the country travel to, as well as really just the background and some great storytelling. Matt, this was a fascinating interview. And really, Steven set the bar high, and you're wondering how is the next episode going to go? No, right there with it. It's fantastic, man. We really followed that up with a bang.
Yeah, any football story that incorporates, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, I'll let all the listeners tune in, keep listening to what I'm talking about. But some of the stories he had talking about him, I'm over here just kind of like, oh my God, this happened.
You got to pick your jaw up off the floor, right? And when you're talking about Steve Clarkson, we've gotten to know him over the last, couple of years since Pierce's commitment back in, what was that, 2022? 22, yeah. So almost going on 2.5 years now. But for those of you listening who aren't familiar, Steve Clarkson is a former college football quarterback who spent some time bouncing around the professional leagues, but has really found a niche for himself as the go-to quarterback developer, right? There's articles from ESPN and from Forbes and from, TV pieces across CBS and other places where Steve has been chronicled for what he has done and his story for that position, and really being able to develop this laundry list of stars. I'm talking multiple Heisman winners, talking multiple first-round draft picks, notable names from 5-star quarterbacks to now, to tie this into Louisville, his son Pierce Clarkson, who is now on campus in his second season, Matt, that it really looks to be competing for that backup spot. And as we kind of talked about off air, it's really exciting to think about, what a role might look like in, certain packages or whatever the case might be for Pierce in year 2. But nonetheless, what's really great from this interview and talking about Pierce is you get to peek a little bit behind the curtains of how his DNA and how he's made up and just his approach to life and to the game. And Steve has seen so much in the game of football that it makes sense, Matt, when you've met Pierce, you've done interviews, you see the just the genes of football translating not only just from the on-field stuff, but to the marketability and understanding of how to carry himself.
Oh yeah, the curtain is in this interview. The curtain was really peeled back just on his overall upbringing, why his mindset is the way it is. Obviously, when you hear that a quarterback's dad is this quote unquote quarterback guru, which ironically enough, Steve said that he hates that moniker, which is hysterical.
Right.
But anyways, when you have a dad who's been around figures in the sport that he's been around and has been doing this for about a decade now, you kind of expect certain things when you have a highly touted prospect come on campus, and it was very interesting just to hear Steve tell all these stories about his upbringing, his role in his son's career and his development as a kid and going into St. John Bosco and all that. It was fascinating to say the least.
Yeah, it's a great interview. As we get ourselves closer to the start of the season, these type of interviews hopefully will put little bit of a wind in your sail, give you some momentum to carry you through the dog days. So thank you all so much for tuning in. We are super excited to keep this series rolling and get into a national perspective of Louisville and talk more things over the coming weeks. But for now, let's go ahead and we'll transition into our interview now with Steve Clarkson. All right, guest number 2. We keep it moving along here. Steve Clarkson joins the program. Steve, how you doing, man? This has been a long time coming. Glad to get you on the show finally.
Oh, outstanding. Glad to be here. I was looking forward to doing it. I know you reached out a while back and we tried to make this happen a little earlier, but I'm glad that I was able to accommodate it now.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And there's no better time to get you on now than just, a couple of weeks following the quarterback retreat. Get to talk a little bit about that. Get to talk a little bit about you and your background, as well as a variety of Louisville topics, man. So we're excited to have you on. And here's what I'll say. I'll kind of start the show with this. Matt's heard this spiel with a number of our guests who have had their sons go on to prominence of some sort in the football ranks. I have a 2-year-old who is built like a 5-year-old. Okay. So he's way ahead of schedule. And Steve, any wisdom that you can pass on as a football dad to a guy like me so that I can get my son in shape so that he is ready to go when he is of age and my wife finally approves of football. So tonight we could talk a little bit of fatherhood as well. So we're excited to have you on. How's everything going out in sunny California, man?
It's a little moist out here. It's hot. We've had a couple of days of, you could feel climate changes here for sure. But no, it's been great. It's been great, obviously.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Love to hear it. Sounds a little bit like Louisville with the humidity where your shirt just sticks to you. You got to change a couple times a day, man. It's that time of year. Well, let's talk a little bit about quarterbacks, man. That's the topic of conversation tonight, really the theme of the show. But I want to first, before we talk about the retreat and your background as a quarterback coach, I just want to learn a little bit about how you got into that realm and specifically with being, kind of that phrase QB guru. I don't know how you feel about the guru, phrase
Hate
as a
it.
quarterback coach. Yeah. See,
I hate it.
I
I
had
hate
a
it.
feeling. I don't know
I don't
why.
even
I
know
just
it.
had a feeling.
Yeah, one needs to know the meaning of guru. I have no idea what that is. So when people come at me, I feel like I should be throwing like poisonous darts or something.
Exactly, man. Wearing like a long gown. Exactly. Just with wisdom all the time. But tell me a little bit how you got into specifically with quarterbacks, coaching that position, and really developing, this brand for yourself as the go-to quarterback development, guy and overall, in the landscape of football.
Well, it really was started by accident. I was actually, when I finished playing ball, I played at San Jose State. That's where I went to college. I played for Jack Elway, John's father. I've known John since I was in the 6th grade. And from there, I was undrafted. It was like 12 rounds back, and that was like the grueling days of the draft. It was all one day, 12 rounds when it was most talented draft ever, 1983. And that was the one with Marino and Elway and Blackledge and Eric Dickerson. And, like to give you an example, I don't even know if you would remember guys like Carl Mecklenburg, who were all pros and probably a Hall of Famer. He was drafted in the 12th round. I mean, so it was really talented back then. Anyway, I went undrafted. I went to the CFL for 2 years, played at the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And when I left there, I was pretty much, my heart just wasn't really in it. Like I enjoyed football, but I didn't want to be one of those guys that was just chasing after something that probably wasn't going to happen. And I got into restaurant management. I was a district manager for a restaurant called Black Angus.
A steakhouse, right?
Yes, a
Ooh.
steakhouse.
Okay,
yeah.
see, I'm here for this.
Yeah.
I'm also a
Yeah.
fellow former restaurant worker. So
Now you've piqued our interest.
yeah, steak, you said. Right.
Well, I was the district manager. I ran like 12 stores in Southern California. And back in those days, the Black Angus was actually one of the better nightclubs, believe it or not. So it had the restaurant on, for till 11, and then it turned into a nightclub thereafter. It was a pretty good time. I was younger and took advantage of, my status at that point. I got approached by a gentleman who had a kid who was a quarterback, and he was not really a quarterback. He was a volleyball player. He had just come from the Junior Olympics, and his high school coach had come up to him and asked him if he would think about playing football and playing the position of quarterback in particular. But he had no real knowledge of how to play the position. And I don't know, my aunt had seen an article about this Pop Warner group looking for coaches. And so she sent the guy my number, and the guy called me up, and I said, I work at Black Angus restaurants. I oversee 12 restaurants. I'm working 80 hours a week. I have no interest in coaching. And then he kind of put 2 and 2 together. He says, well, wait a minute. You're Clarkson. You played at San Jose State. I said, yeah. He says, my son Perry and we used to watch the Elway versus Elway games. Because John was at Stanford, and obviously I was with his dad at San Jose State. So we were always on TV for that game. And, he said, would you mind? My son's trying out for quarterback. He's never played before. I would love it if you ever got some time, you come to Santa Monica and just give him a few pointers. I'd gladly pay you for your time. I said, yeah, not necessary. My aunt lives right around the corner. When I go visit, I'll give you a call and I'll take a look at him. And sure enough, probably about a couple of weeks later, I went down. I gave the gentleman a call. His name was Danny Klein, and I met the kid over at Palisades Park, and yeah, he was. I remember the first time I laid eyes on him, he looked like Sean Penn, the actor, and that was probably my biggest takeaway from him. Yeah, we put him through a couple of drills, and he was a lanky kid. He was okay, and I just wished him well after about 40 minutes, and said good luck. And I don't know, it was I was leaving, and it's like that aha moment. So I was getting into my car, and something said to turn around. I don't know what made me turn around. I turned around, and I looked. The kid put the football down, and he was doing these backflips and handstands, and I mean, he was just like he was an incredible gymnast as well as his family was actually. They were like all state in gymnastics. I remember closing the door and running back to the kid, and I told him, I said, "Hey, give me that front flip again." And he would do a front flip and then a back flip. And then I said, and then the light bulb went in my head. And I said, if I could teach this kid to play quarterback, and every time he threw a touchdown pass, he did one of these flips, we could be famous. And that was pretty much kind of the genesis of how that started. There was, before USA Today, there was a newspaper called the National Sports Daily, and it was basically the same premise but all sports. And Frank DeFord, who had just left Sports Illustrated, along with a few other great writers from like the LA Times and New York Times, put together this news rag. And I knew Frank really well, and I said, hey, I got this kid who's going to break every national high school single season passing record, and for nationally. I said, I would love if you guys would just do a story on him. And he says, look, we're looking for content. I said, look, give me his stats after the first 3 games and show me some film, and if it's worthy, we'll do a Perry Klein watch. And his first 3 games, he was like 1,300 yards. It's like something crazy. It was like actually like a little over 1,000 yards for 3 games. And back, you're talking 1986. This was unheard of because people didn't throw the football back then. Yeah. And they started the Perry Klein watch. And then with the Perry Klein watch, people were reading all his exploits. And then I started getting all these calls nationally. And it just sort of took off from there. I remember getting a call from Tommy Maddox out in Texas. And he brought his kid to UCLA, and the next thing I knew, I was training him. And then college coaches were calling me, and a few years later, it really took off, and I ended up taking a leave of absence at Black Angus. And the funny thing was, I never quit, so I'm sure I got a 401k active in there somewhere.
Yeah, you got a shift next week, man. You better. They're expecting you to be
so
there.
It sort of took off, but I've always, I'm a marketer by heart. I had always kind of coached from an entertainment value, and even my camps today are kind of entertainment based. They're actually more like socials, if you will. So kind of fast forwarding to kind of what you see now. And I've had some other, through these exploits, I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of individuals, and did a lot of great pieces. I mean, I had some features in 60 Minutes and Rolling Stone magazine. I mean, some of the things that you just wouldn't attribute to someone in my field, I was getting this kind of notoriety. So with that, came a lot of attention. And I remember back in 2000, one of the most interesting calls I'd ever gotten was in 2007, actually. I got a call from, it was on my voice. Remember the old voicemail, right? You didn't have, what you have today. Yep. So you had a voicemail, right? So I hear this voicemail, a really sexy sounding lady, and she identifies herself as Jennifer Montana. And I said, wait a minute. She goes, I got your number from Charlie Weiss, and Charlie recommended, we were looking for somebody to work with our boys, and he brought your name up. And so, I would love it if, you give us a call back and let us know if you're available. I must have played that over like maybe 4 or 5 times. I somebody like effing with me, And so I remember calling her. I called her back, and I said, is this the Jennifer Montana? And of course I sound like an idiot when I said that.
Right.
She just identified herself as Jennifer Montana. She goes, yeah. I go, Joe's wife, right? And she goes, yeah, that would be me. And she just started laughing. And so we talked for about 20 minutes or so, and she was trying to find, somebody to work with her boys. And I said, well, why would you need anybody to work with your two
Right.
sons?
Send them out there with pops.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
are you kidding? She goes, well, believe it or not, they don't listen to them.
Right.
Well, yeah.
And they're going to
That's a
listen
good
to
point.
me. So they flew me up to Calistoga, California, which is
Jeez.
just above Napa. Beautiful country. They owned at the time, it was like a 50-acre ranch up in the hills of Calistoga. And I remember, he went to Cardinal, the boys went to Cardinal Newman High School. I don't know if you remember, maybe about 8 years ago or so, they had those horrific fires up in Northern California that actually burned that school down. It's since been rebuilt, but that was the school that they went to before they had transferred to De La Salle High School. And so I remember, going to the field, met him, and of course, I'm thinking, this is Joe freaking Montana and his wife. Are you fucking kidding me? So get on the field. I got the kids there, and I don't even know what to do. Like I said, I don't know if I can do this, And then if it wasn't even more intimidating, they brought out a blanket and they lay it on the 50-yard line, and both Jen and her husband lie down on this blanket, and they're watching me work with their sons.
Oh, it's like a picnic for a workout, man.
Yeah,
Right,
I've never seen it before, so I'm just sitting there. I'm like, okay. 20 minutes into it, I, kind of out of the corner of my eye, I'm I see them packing their blanket up. I said, God, I must have really sucked, And so they get up, and Joe comes over, shakes my hand. He says, congratulations, you're our son's new quarterback coach if you want it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, let's go. So it was so funny. Like a week later, I get invited to go. The boys are playing. They just transferred to De La Salle, and they're going to a basketball tournament right in the heart of San Francisco. And so they invited me up, and it was Joe's 50th birthday. And so they wanted me to come up and spend some time with them, and come hang out with him on his birthday. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna like hang out. I got Dwight Clark, I got Ronnie Lott, and I got all these guys I'm thinking about I'm gonna hang out with. It's like, I'm at Joe Montana's 50. Are you kidding me? His 50th birthday. And I show up, and we get to this little place in Walnut Creek, just a little dive bar or whatever. And I'm like looking around thinking, well, maybe they got the place closed down. Nope, pretty empty. And it's kind of like in between games, or they had, actually the boys had just finished a game, so we just meet there, and it's just me, Joe, Jennifer, and their neighbors. That's it. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty sad. Like, his 50th birthday, and that's what they're doing. I mean, I got it later, but at the time, I'm like, this is like kind of great. No Dwight Clark. I'm looking, no surprise, no anything, And I'm not a drinker, Joe has a couple of IPAs that he's got there. He's, hey, try this for me, So I'm drinking a couple of these things. I think they're disgusting, but anyway,
Right, you're trying.
I'm trying, And probably 30 minutes into we're just sitting down, just talking, whatever. He gets a couple of napkins and he starts drawing plays. And he's showing me all the little nuances of what they did under Bill Walsh's offense. And I just kept thinking to myself, I had this big grin thinking, I cannot believe I'm sitting here with Joe Montana on his 50th birthday, and I'm watching him diagram plays for me. How cool is this? You know what I mean? So, and so that was kind of how, our relationship started. And then kind of fast forwarding to how the retreat came about. So in that March, they would always take a trip. As for spring break, they'd go to Maui, and they'd stay at the Four Seasons there. And I guess Joe got the wild hair up his ass and say, hey, why don't we, he told his wife, why don't we bring the Clarksons with us, and we'll have them come out, and the boys can train, and we'll be like kind of a family vacation. So they asked us if we wanted to go, and I was like, oh yeah, well, are we going to go to Maui? Yeah, of course. That was the first time we'd ever been. So we went as a family. It was my wife Lisa, and Wes, my oldest son, and a young Pierce who was like 6. And my kids were not football players, to say the least. I was very terrified of pushing them into that sport. because of what I did for a living, I didn't want to have that be the basis of our relationship. So I didn't push sports on him. Wes was self-taught to play basketball through YouTube, and Pierce just sort of gradually, kind of gravitated to football. But they both had their gaming sets. So Pierce was always Madden, and Wes was always NBA 2K or whatever it was that they played back then. So they kind of just had their own thing. But we fly to Maui. We're there for a week in March. And they put us up in the Grand Wailea, which is a more kid-friendly hotel with the water slides and whatnot. And then they stayed across the, literally across the little walking space, and they were at the Four Seasons. In between the two hotels was this patch of grass that was probably like maybe 50 yards wide and long, but the grass was like a putting green. It was immaculate. And I remember, we kind of met them out there. There was like a little restaurant there and swim up bar that was in between. And Pierce has this little water football, and he's kind of walking out that little grass area. And Joe follows him. And next thing I know, Joe and Pierce are out there throwing passes. That's the first time I really seen Pierce like throw. And I'm like, this is insane. Like, our family got flown out here, got paid, by the way, to train his kids. They paid for our vacation. And oh, by the way, maybe the greatest instructor of all time is working with my son. And he just laughing and having a good old time, And at that point, I looked at this place, and I looked around, and I said, God, this would be a great place to get a bunch of families together and share like thoughts about, recruiting and whatnot. And we just, use this patch of grass. And we just have this like little camp. We get the Islanders here, and we just, put this together. And that's really how the QB retreat was formed. Before that, I had, kids. I mean, believe it or not, I had guys like Steve Sarkisian were former clients. I mean, I had Steve since he was 12. I mean, so this is the head coach of Texas, right? He's there. I mean, so, Lane Kiffin, same thing. I mean, these are, they grew up with me, and, here it was at this little retreat that, this got so widely acclaimed. But it really started kind of with how Joe did this thing. And then the thing that was so cool about it was meant for like the college quarterbacks to share their time with the young kids and like what it took for them to get where they were at. But Joe took it one step further. I mean, he just like, I would never ask him to do anything, but he just sort of organically just wanted to do stuff. And, I'm not going to tell him, no, it's Joe freaking Montana, right? So he gets up on the board one day for lunch out of the blue, and I'll never forget it. Are you guys familiar with The Catch?
Yes.
The one
yes.
with Dwight Clark. Okay.
Yes.
So there's this like legendary photo from a famous photographer. There's a picture of Joe at Candlestick Park, and he's kind of squatted down, and it looks like he's doodling a play in the dirt of the infield, and Bill Walsh is standing over him. Well, that was a timeout prior to the catch against the Cowboys in the playoff game. And, the legend had it that they were diagramming the very play that they scored the touchdown on. And Joe openly admitted, no, that's not what happened. He goes, the truth is nothing. We already knew what play we were going to run. It was sprint right option. I was just exhausted, and I just kneeled down. I just started, doodling in the dirt.
Like a little kid in the outfield, just not getting the ball.
He just needed 5.
So I'm like, oh my God. So then he goes and he diagrams the play. And what happened is this is just a simple curl flat. The flanker comes in motion. He comes inside X. He runs a flat, X runs a curl. I sprint right. And then, Y would drag across. Anyway, probably he said that 90% of the time he would hit, Z on the flat. And in this case, it was a guy by the name of Freddie Solomon. Freddie Solomon was the guy that came before John Taylor. Anyway, Freddie comes out of the break. Joe rolls right, and Freddie comes out of the break, and he is just getting ready to throw it. And Freddie slips and falls. And Joe was strong enough that he caught his motion halfway and he was able to hang on to the ball. He said, "Oh shit." And now he's like kind of like, stammering like what he should do. And he's like rolling right. And there was no real play. And he was just trying to survive. And hopefully somebody came open. And literally he says, I was just throwing it away. And out of the blue, this skyscraper named Dwight Clark pulls the ball
Emerges.
out of the air.
Mm-hmm.
And they score the winning touchdown. And of course, that was the legend, but the legend started with a photo that had nothing to do with the play, but nobody ever disclaimed it until Joe did it at the camp. And that was kind of like, wow, are you kidding me? Like these are the things that happened at the retreat. And those stories are kind of like when people come, that's kind of what they get. Everybody kind of lets their hair down, so to speak, and they kind of just speak the truth about things that happened or didn't happen. And the kids get a kick out of it, because these athletes that they look up to are human. They're humanized and they can relate, and the parents can relate, and they make for great stories and times, and that's probably the biggest success of the program is that kids keep coming back. So kids have been with me for the longest, from 8, 9, 10 years old. They go on to college and then they come back. So we've had like 4 or 5 Heisman Trophy winners. It's a pretty cool vibe for sure.
So when it came time for Pierce to take part, like how, it was okay. First of all, how long had it been going on by the time like he finally got to participate?
Oh my God. Well, like I said, we've been doing some form of it since '04, and then it
Okay,
didn't take off until, like I said, Joe hit it until he did it in Maui in like 2008, I want to say. But
gotcha.
since then, but he, like I said, it took a while for, I think at the time that he played, he ended up playing his first. He didn't play tackle till 10, and it was so funny because Pierce was um, always very gifted, played a lot of sports. I mean, like I actually thought at one point he was going to be a soccer player because he was really good at it. I hated soccer, still do, but he enjoyed it, and it was like there was always a constant battle between him and his brother. Like he always adored his brother, and his brother, that was his idol. But when it came to the athletic gene, for some reason, Pierce was just better. He was just more natural. So my oldest son played soccer for like a year, didn't score his first points until he kicked a penalty kick. And in a sudden death playoff.
Wow.
Pierce's first soccer game, he scored 6 goals. So
Oh my
it was
God.
like, it was just so unfair. And just like, my oldest son, Wes, he would just put his head down like he couldn't believe it. It actually took him a while to kind of understand, like, Pierce, the individual. He's just a different cat. I mean, he's always been different. And I think when he kind of came into, he got a chance to see a lot of people and how they interact, how they interview, you know, how they study. At a young age, he was able to see so many different guys that it just became easy for him. So organically, they were really his real teachers and his big foundation. Because, like I said, I didn't really spend a lot of time with him on it just because I wanted to respect the father-son relationship and not be father-son coach or whatever the case may be.
So by the time he actually does participate in the camp, like, I mean, having the upbringing he has and being around guys like, Joe Montana and other notable quarterbacks around, like, by the time he gets to the retreat, you would think that he's pretty, advanced as far as his development. So how did he actually perform when it came time to, go through drills and take reps at the retreat?
Well, like I said, he learned a lot, so he was a champ. I mean, like he breezed through drills. I mean, like I said, he was a natural athlete. He was always had great feet, and so that was easy. He wasn't the biggest kid, but he was probably always the most athletic. And people, I think the thing that he was really mentally, if I could say, he learned this at a very young age. I kind of brought him up like a boxer. So when he did play youth ball, he was playing for the neighborhood, Pop Warner team, and we didn't even have to get on freeways to play games when the games were pretty close proximity. And then when he was 13, he was just dying to go play for this club team, which I wasn't sure he was good enough at the time. It was the IE Ducks, which is a nationally acclaimed youth team that's won national championships. And you've had the Bryce Youngs and the JT Daniels and the CJ Stroud. All these guys have played for the Ducks. And had most of them had won national championships. So Pierce went there, and I was like, you had to battle like 8 kids to get the job. He ends up winning the job. And I remember his first year there, we're playing games on, like they're being, what do you call it? Streamed on all these YouTube and whatnot. And so people are seeing these games. And so people know who the characters are. And when the Ducks would take the field, like everybody would stop and to go watch this team. Because, you're talking about, linemen on these teams like 6'5", 300 pounds. I mean, it's like, it should be against the law to have kids that big, that young, but they were like huge. So, Pierce is out there, and I think we ended up going like 4-0. And then we go to Maryland, played the Maryland Heat. And I mean, this atmosphere was insane. It was like 6,000 people for a youth game at a high school stadium at 9:00 at night. And the people that would be at this game were probably you wouldn't want to go hang out with. It's a different element, right? Sure. They're drinking out of brown paper bags, if you get my drift, right? Sure. And so we play this team, which is they were ranked number 2, we were ranked number 1, and Pierce did not play well, to put it that way. But he played well enough to win we were down by 4 points with under, a minute or so. He drives us 70 yards and throws a touchdown in the corner to win the game. But he had 4 picks. And, hearing the people, kind of talk, and I mean, it was brutal. I mean, you talk about a 13-year-old kid. There was no mercy. It was like, that kid sucks. He 4 picks, whatever. And even the kids on the team, they nicknamed him 4-Pick Pierce. So he goes to practice, and he's taking it. It's 4-Pick Pierce, 4-Pick Pierce, whatever. So they were getting ready to play against the Orange County Buckeyes, which is a rival. And on that team is Noah Fafita and T-Mac, Tatoria McMillan. I mean, these guys were, they were great. And our coach, Keefe Pearson, who is like a legend, he coaches in flip-flops. So just to tell you something.
I'm here for that, man. Here for that.
So we're at pregame, and he's getting the kids all fired up, and he gets the kids together, and he says, "Look, now remember, we had just come off the 4-pick game for Pierce." And he gets the team. He says, "Look, we're gonna beat this fucking team, and the only reason we don't beat this team," and he says, "Pierce, stand up." And Pierce stands up. He goes, "If we lose, it's your fucking fault." And I'm like, "Oh my God." I'm like, what you just do to my son? And Pierce didn't say anything. And I got to tell you, he went out there and had the game of his life. Like 6 touchdowns. It was like a mop up. And, this is a very talented team. And from that point on, he just, took off. His attitude is just like his demeanor, and he won the respect of everybody, the community and his teammates. And like I said, these are kids that are on that team. Like every one of them are in Division I college somewhere, and that led him to. When I say like raising like a fighter, I wanted to kind of do it in stages. And so when he passed that test, that was going to allow me to say what high school he could go to, because you got to keep in mind having the name Clarkson was a blessing and a curse, because if, a college coach is going to come and say, well, how is it dealing with Clarkson? Is he meddling? Is he whatever? And it's like, I had to send him someplace where I knew if he was ever going to be good enough, he was going to have to make it, but somebody else was going to have to advocate for him, and they were going to have to get him ready to play. And he decided to go to St. John Bosco. And St. John Bosco had, again, I wasn't sure. Like I saw those kids, I was like, yeah, I don't know if he's gonna make it here. I mean, the kids were 6'5", 6'4", whatever. DJU had just gotten there and just finished and won a national championship, and here Pierce having to battle 15 kids to go to, to win this job. And I just wasn't sure. But I will say though, if you're asking what is his biggest, there's two things about Pierce that are special. His ability to lead. He is sort of the Pied Piper. For whatever reason, he's got that it factor and people tend to follow. That's one. But if you're asking me, his biggest strength is he's not afraid to lose. And that's important because, if you're not afraid to lose, then you give yourself the best possible chance to win. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that he has going for him, is he just has that mindset. Like, look, I'm gonna go all out. Look, there's gonna be a winner, there's gonna be a loser. I'm gonna try to win. Because either way, somebody's gonna win or lose. So I can't worry about it. Just go play. And that's kind of always been his mindset. So, and even when he decided to come to Louisville, it wasn't like he was looking for the place that was already tailor made. He was looking for a place that he could call his own and that he could help build. And that was like what really turned him on about it. What turned me on about it was he didn't have a pro team. So it was very similar to my days when USC was here. And, we didn't have a pro team. The Rams were in St. Louis and the Raiders were in Oakland. And USC was, in fact, that pro team. And I remember what that was like. And so it had a lot of that vibe to it. If the city got behind their sports clubs, that this could be a very, very special place. We both saw that, but he was the one that actually was the one that really saw it and put it together.
All right, so I have to ask this before we really start kind of diving into the Louisville football side of things. I am a advertiser by day. I'm a media buyer and planner. Have been doing that now for several years. I absolutely love what I do. And so when Pierce committed to Louisville and the digital billboards ran across the city, I mean, I think I geeked for weeks. I remember tweeting about it. I think I still have a picture of it from when I'm coming off of 65 into downtown at the convention center. I think like at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and seeing that and just being like, this is incredible. No one's ever done anything like this. Tell me a little bit. I know you said you're a marketer, so branding and really, being able to craft this story and start to kind of build this persona is a gift of yours. But tell me a little bit about how the billboards came together once Pierce's commitment, and all the things that kind of came into that.
Well, the biggest thing was we didn't think people would take us seriously. California kid, coming to Louisville, Kentucky to play football, and especially as early as he committed, because the way kids commit and decommit, it was probably easy to shoot that down. Like, hey, look, he committed in January, but he's not gonna stay committed. He'll be decommitting in May. That was kind of like about, especially like when it became more as we got closer and you had the UCLAs and people like that were really trying to get him to decommit. Pierce wanted to recruit the very best class he could recruit. And if he wavered in any way, he knew that was going to defeat the purpose. So he didn't take any other trips. And he stayed the course. And what the billboards was to basically tell everyone that we are dead serious about our commitment, and we're big on our word, and it was not going to be taken lightly. We weren't going to go through this and then all of a sudden he's decommitting, because that's not what we're about. If we make the commitment, we're committed, and we wanted to show the other kids who were thinking about coming that this was real. And Pierce took it to the next level with wanting to just make this a movement, not only about the university and the other and the athletes that go there, but also about the city. I mean, like, he was really intrigued with just the city vibe, because when our perception of Louisville, never had been there before, that June before. We just thought it was like an open field and like bluegrass or whatever.
Right,
so we had no idea that we were like
You're not the
5
first
minutes from
person to say
downtown.
that.
Right, exactly.
when Pierce would bring, recruits or ask recruits to come, he wouldn't tell them anything about it. He always felt like it would be better for it to be an organic situation, to let them kind of come here, and then whatever perception that they have, if they didn't think that it was going to wow them when they, if the expectations were low, the chances were better for us to have, higher success, because it's how we were attracted to it. Like our expectations, I did this as a favor of a guy that was at Adidas, a real dear friend of mine, Shannon Furbach, who brought me on to Adidas when, we started this venture. And so I did it as a favor to him. And of course, Satterfield was a coach there, at that time. So, we really didn't think, and Sat was really good, and the staff was really good and amiable, and they did all the right things at the time. But it was a challenge, and we were afraid, like when they started losing, the one thing that, the one wrench that there could have been was that if they didn't have either an extension for Sat, because if he went into, let's say, his last year when Pierce would have been a freshman and he was still up in the air, that would have been a disaster, because a couple of games in, you fire the coach. Guess who else you fire? The quarterback. Right.
Yep.
So now everybody's out on the run and starting over. And so that was our one big thing. And so, when it was known that, Sat was going to be gone, of course, then we really started getting people, trying to test, well, he's gone, you need him. And I think from our standpoint, we found out fairly early that it was going to be Braum. And to his credit, we just internally as a household, we just said, well, here's what we'll do. I said, he's got his press con. I think he was hired on a Wednesday, had his press conference on a Thursday, and Pierce had his state championship game, which ended up being, for the national title, on Saturday. And I said, if he gets on the plane and shows up for our game, that's a lock. Like we felt like that's all we needed, was for him to just say, hey, look, you're a priority, and we'll do this. So once he came, that was it. I mean, Pierce played a hell of a game. He won.
Yeah, he did.
Won the game, and
didn't he throw a touchdown right in front of him, if I'm not mistaken, at the back corner into the end zone? Yeah.
One thing you'll know about Pierce is he's kind of he's a low key shit talker too.
Yeah, I can see it for sure. I can say it, right?
So I mean, he comes off one way, but he kind of is, he's a little different. Like I said, I hope people get the chances. He loves the kids and loves, he'll do anything for his boys and the people. But if he does manage to get on the field, he will talk smack. I hope people, aren't shocked.
It's funny you say that, because I remember watching I think it was one of the last open practices at spring. He was running the ball, and he got kind of a little bit of like a late hit by someone. I can't even remember who made it.
Stanquan. It was Stanquan.
Oh, it was Stanquan?
Yeah.
Oh, so he told you this story.
Everybody told me this story.
So for the listening audience that doesn't know, Stanquan hits Pierce late, and of course, like most quarterbacks probably aren't going to get in the face of the uber athletic linebacker, but no, Pierce gets right up and gets right in Stanquan's face, and they kind of have to get separated. It was Pierce wasn't backing down, that's for sure.
Yeah, but they are brothers, and they love each other, and you usually find them both together at some place. They're always together. But so hey, when you're practicing like that, and you're trying to win, and it's competitive. When you get to practice, that's kind of what's needed. When you have to separate, off the field to like on the field. I'm trying to kill you, and that's that works both ways. And so, it was much appreciated, and it showed where both teams actually kind of rallied behind, or both sides of the ball rallied behind, both players, and it showed, a nice bonding moment. So yeah, it was good.
I'm here for it, man. I'm here for it. Look, I'm always here for a feisty quarterback that's not afraid to stand up, man. That's one of the best traits you can get. Speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about you've mentioned some of year one and just the mindset of getting to Louisville, and putting in the work that it takes to get there, and then some of the lead up with the high school stuff. But take me into the transition for Pierce from redshirt freshman into, or I guess freshman season into redshirt freshman season. With the a battle kind of opening back up with Jack Plummer graduating and new faces coming in. What's kind of the work? What have you seen from him from a work perspective, and some of the changes that he's made to his game, his approach, things like that?
Well, I think the biggest thing is he's always going to focus on him and what he needs to do. So he's all, the thing that you'll notice is he's always been a great teammate. And when it wasn't a shock that he knew that they were going to bring in a transfer portal guy, and it ended up being Tyler. And I know when Tyler first got there, I mean, Pierce was one of the first guys to get him in and try to acclimate him with the playbook. And they spend a lot of time together, and they're very close. And that's kind of always been his thing. It's like he's here for it. He's supportive. At the same token, I mean, he's still going to try to battle, even though it looks like it's a foregone conclusion. But he wants to prepare to be the starter, and if I'm sure all those guys are doing the same thing, and that's always the best way to be. Just compete with yourself, and then when your time is called, be ready to go. And whoever that may be, I'm sure they'll be ready. That's the way they're developed, and that's the way coach has had it. And I think the quarterback room is pretty solid in that respect. But from his standpoint, his approach has always been, I just want to be better than yesterday. And he's done some subtle things like he's been spending some time with with the defensive coordinator and the defensive staff, and just learning the little nuances that they see, to give him a better idea of some of the things that from a defensive perspective, what they try to make the offense do, and vice versa. So those are things that he's kind of put in his bag of tricks, so to speak, so that he can learn some different elements. Because it's always good to have some other voices. Obviously, having Jeff and Brian and that offensive staff, they'll have one philosophy, but then the defense is going to have a whole nother look. And then he'll spend time with with Q Riley, and he'll say, hey, look, this is what I'm looking to do when I see you in this formation. And so it works, and it actually helps from a squad standpoint, because they both kind of benefit from the dialogue.
So obviously you haven't been there for every single time that they go out and practice or anything in that sort of atmosphere and nature and whatnot. But over the course of his about 2 or so years that he's been on campus since he was an early enrollee, what do you think has been sort of like, from conversations that you've had with them and maybe the few times you have been able to see him like in person, take reps in practice, what do you think has been like the biggest jump in his overall game, going from a highly touted prospect at St. John Bosco to where he is right now, to where he's preparing to potentially take reps in game if Shuck gets hurt again?
Well, I think physically he's bigger. He's a lot
He is.
stronger.
Yeah,
And he's a lot faster.
it was great seeing that, man. I gotta say, and maybe this was just my eye. I feel like about halfway through the season last year, there was a noticeable change in just the size of him on the sideline. Like, it just looked like all of a sudden he went from a high school player to like being a college ready guy with like a college ready body.
Yeah, he's definitely taken that to heart. People got to remember, he didn't have spring football his first year. I mean, he was hurt, had the toe surgery, and so he missed all that valuable time. And then by the time you get to summer, you got Jack there, and you're getting ready for Georgia Tech, so you're not really in the plans at that point. And so this spring is really his first taste of being healthy and getting a chance to add some weight. He's up. It's like 197 pounds yesterday. Coach Reno, the strength coach, wants him at, hopefully by camp, to be at 205, knowing he'll lose 10 pounds, and his playing weight this year should be about 195. But some of the things that he's really worked on, continues to work on his quickness and agility and his core strength. But one of the things he's really working on is generating more velocity with his off arm, kind of engaging into his core and kind of helping him block off on the back end of throws with his legs, and his ankle, hip, off arm kind of all working sequentially. So it's kind of like if you were, I like to equate it, if you're driving a car and all of a sudden, like, somebody runs out in front of you, all of a sudden you slam on the brakes, right? And then your head sort of snaps. Well, that's kind of what he's doing when he's working on his throwing motion. When I talk about those three elements with the off arm, his back hip and his back ankle kind of all hitting at the same time. It's that positive hitting a negative equals a positive, and that's kind of been his biggest thing that he's been working on, is just sort of that trajectory of really working, getting that extra torque out of his ball without, having and trying at the same time to eliminate his, the any kind of wind up in his throw. So trying to tighten all that up, and that's a work in progress. But that's kind of the one aspect of him physically, on top of just getting bigger and stronger, that he's been working on. It seems to have been paying off for him so far.
Yeah, in terms of going through spring and now summer workouts and being around the team and the new transfers, what's the excitement level like translating? Obviously, it's a game of telephone from, when you all speak and when you've been around in spring, but just the excitement level from yourself and Pierce and just everyone around the Louisville program for year 2 under Jeff Brom, and the potential for this team to be, potential college football playoff contending team if you look at things.
Well, I mean, obviously there's tons of excitement based on last year, but there's also, more expectation. And with that becomes a lot more anxiety, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak as a parent. I mean, it's kind of the, you enjoy it, but you hate it at the same time because it's gut wrenching, to watch, not only Pierce, but just the team in general. I mean, you're watching them play, and your emotions go up and down as the team goes, and you want them to be at their very best, and you want them to succeed. And but these teams that they're playing, they're no joke. I mean, and there isn't, I would caution people about the schedule. And they look at Austin P and they look at Jacksonville State and they say, well, we should beat them. And players feel that because you're not supposed to just win those games. You're supposed to beat them decisively. But those are the toughest games to play, because the expectations are you just can't win. If you don't look great doing it, well, you're not very good, or you had an off day or whatever. And so you kind of put yourself in a situation where you're in a position to fail. And those are the types of games, as a former player, I didn't really enjoy them that much, because one, if you really beat a bad, you weren't going to play that long as a starter. And if you didn't do well, I mean, it's like, oh man, if we struggled against them, what's next? So, the schedule itself, I mean, we won 10 games last year. I mean, if we were 10-4, there's not a game that we couldn't win, but there's not a game that we couldn't lose. And that's not coach speak, it's just fact. I mean, you obviously
Right.
look at the first two and you say, well, we would be hard pressed to lose those two games, or one of those two games. But Georgia Tech, to me, is scary. I mean, they have a real offense, a real quarterback, and a real defense, and it's a ACC opener. We have a bye prior to that, and I think that will be a very different bye coming so early in the season. I would suspect the kids won't be going home during that off time. I'm sure that will be that will be a very contentious week leading up 2 weeks to that game, because Jeff will be extremely fired up for that. And then you got Notre Dame, and then you come back to SMU. I mean, there's just that schedule's not easy. I mean, so I would caution people that this is going to be some nervous times here, and and despite the transfer portal guys coming in, I would say be patient with Tyler, because there's a lot of nuances there that he's got to learn. New kids, the receivers weren't there for spring, because he wasn't there, and so he's just getting it together. These kids are learning the little nuances of the offense there, so that's going to be tough. And then kind of on that point, I got to say this: I really felt bad for Plummer last year, because I really felt like last year he was maybe he was criticized a little bit too heavy. Yeah, did he have some games that you wish he'd played better? I'm sure he did too, but there was still a lot of that. I mean, from a coaching staff, yeah, they had him at Purdue, but he didn't really play for them. He had that's why he left for Cal, right? And
Right.
so,
Mm-hmm.
and he was really the coach on the field because none of these kids knew any of this very complicated system. And so Jack was really all they had, and he had to be the coach on the field. And I think there were times when I'm going to go back to that where I think he after the Pitt game, I don't think he really recovered mentally from that. I think that loss was devastating, from that standpoint because uh, yeah, I think we just beat Notre Dame. I want to say I went into the Pitt
Yep.
game because we were undefeated, right? When we lost
Yeah.
that game,
They
right?
just beat Notre Dame. Yeah.
They had just beat Notre Dame. You go play that game, and it wasn't a great game. And the field was awful. Gerard didn't play, and um, I think after that point, I think he was trying not to lose games.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, at that position, it's hard to play that way. I mean, you just got to let it rip. And I just felt like, that game probably hurt his chances to really be successful and to really, get the season that he was hoping for. But all that being said, we don't win 10 games without him. So, I just think that, for if you said to us before the season started, hey, you're going to win 10 games, I think everybody signs up for that. Am I wrong?
Yeah. No, everyone's
course.
signing up for that.
Yeah. So, I just think, you win a few games and then all of a sudden expectations rise and then all of a sudden it's not good enough. But, you know, um, 10 wins this year would be outstanding, gentlemen. I'm telling you, that schedule is not easy. I mean, I saw somebody's podcast. They say, well, we're going to win this game, this game. I'm like, ooh, okay.
Yeah. Right. Right.
There's some
Oh,
games
no.
on there where some teams are going to get overlooked at some point.
Yeah.
Oh, it always happens. It
Especially the
always
way they
happens.
stack up, right? Where you've got road game at BC and then you turn right back around to go to Clemson, right? I always say
Yeah.
what's worse than going to Chestnut Hill in the middle of late
Mhm.
October. I mean, no one wants to
Oh,
do that.
that
That's
BC game, I'm gonna tell you, that game scares the hell out of me because
we
it's
say
a
that every year.
Friday.
Look, Steve, literally
But
every year.
it's a Friday night, and that's to me, I hate college football on Friday night. It just shouldn't be.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the take. I
And
like
you're
it.
going to play, and you're going to play and I hope it's not a red bandana game because they rarely lose those games.
Ooh, I can see them making that the red bandana game.
Yeah, if they do that, oh God, So I just, and yeah, it's a hard game for our fan base to travel on a Friday. It's hard in general because I hate Boston, period. But and you're going to go there on a Friday night. That's a tough one. So that's a game that really scares me a lot. If you're asking me, like, what's the one that you really got to be careful of, the game that you should win, but you could lose. That one would be one for sure.
Yeah, it seems like there's always one game per year where they're like, if they don't operate with the utmost urgency and aren't efficient, this is one where they're going to trip over themselves. And
Yeah.
that one comes to mind, like you said, Georgia Tech with Haynes King and how good
Yeah.
he is.
Well, just think about this. I mean, is there a team that we play that doesn't have a really good quarterback? I mean, maybe Pitt may be the only one that I don't know.
Pitt might be the only one, yeah.
Pitt may be the only one.
Yeah, but they've got the worst QB situation in the ACC, so that's
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I mean, you're going to get the best of the best quarterbacks this season. I mean, top to bottom.
I mean, and I hear the kid at Virginia is not even starting. The freshman kid, they're going back, and I thought that kid was phenomenal. I'm like,
yeah.
Oh yeah,
what?
Calandry does some things that Musket can't. I mean, Musket's the senior, but Calandry is clearly more talented.
Yeah, I mean, he was great, and Virginia Tech. I mean, there's just not. I mean, there are some really really good quarterbacks in this league. Like I said, the only two that I can think of that are maybe questionable would be Stanford and Pitt.
Yeah,
but other than that, I mean, we're gonna have our hands full.
Yeah, and kind of going a little bit of a different subject, and then we'll get you out of here. Obviously, in this new age of college athletics, there's the portal, and then there's NIL, and I kind of want to speak on like the NIL front because obviously Pierce hasn't tested the transfer portal aspect of it, but as someone who obviously didn't grow up with this being so prevalent and so I guess above table, since I mean players have been getting paid for years. It's just been all over the table. We can say that. But like in this age of college athletics where NIL is such a huge driving factor, not only in recruitments, but just how athletic departments operate as a whole. I mean, there was the House case, like was settled a week ago, and by the 2025-26 season, schools are going to have to fork over an additional 20 million a year just to get their NIL budgets in place. And just a few years ago, that would have been crazy just to think about. So I'm curious, what are some of your thoughts on just NIL in general? It doesn't have to pertain specifically to Pierce, but like just NIL in general, and maybe Pierce too, because we're not entirely sure how. I'm sure he's being treated well, but we don't know the ins and outs on how all that's going. But I guess just how do you feel about like the direction of college football and NIL's kind of presence in it?
Well, I mean, look, it was a long time coming. I'm not sure that this latest quote unquote settlement from the NCAA schools, the Power Four, if that's going to really hold water at the end of the day, because you still don't have a voice for the student athletes. One, two, you're coming up with a figure of $20 million is kind of like up to $20 million. That's not, it's not collectively bargained. But the thing that I scratch my head. People have this perception that they're one and the same. NIL and what they're saying shared revenue are two different things. And people are saying, well, it's the pro model. Well, no, it's not, because the pro model, you have your wages, and you have your hell, the Players Association, they get 51% of the profits, right? And then, but they still have individual marketing. Then you have the NFLPA, where you have some group licensing that kind of allows the non skill position kids, or whatever the case may be, allows them marketing opportunities, so they get something. But it's a long way, I think, from being settled, because one, every time you turn around, we went from an 18 playoff to a 12-team playoff, and next week they'll be talking about 14 and 16.
Right.
I mean, so they keep sort of moving the goalpost down to kind of fit an area where they can kind of cover what they think is going to be their losses of 20 million. And then how do you still deal with Title IX? And now you're starting to get the true definition of Title IX, which basically is just an academic opportunity for the most part, and it's not tied into name, image, and likeness. And so where I think it goes, I think, here's the thing: the Georgias, the Alabamas, the teams, the schools that have always had the advantages prior to NIL, they're still going to have the advantage. Because think about it. To your point earlier, Matt, you said, well, there's always been that booster that's going to do that handshake. I don't care what you throw out there. When somebody wants a player, there's always going to be that guy that's going to add something to the pot. So whatever the case may be, where does it go? And so I don't think you can ever really regulate it. I mean, what's the Big 12 talking about now, doing venture capitalists, to go, and really that's probably where it ends up going. I mean, when you think about it, because it's the one way. Now, again, they're going to need something out of it. It's a very interesting dynamic. At the end of the day, I probably don't see this really being worked out for 2 years, because again, you still have 2 years of the initial. What is ESPN's? I know they just extended their contract for the playoffs, but what is it, the next 2 years, or the current at 12, right? So I would think after, maybe 18 to 24 months, you'll actually start to see something a little bit more, you get a better idea of where this is really headed. But the NIL part versus, the revenue share, two different things. And I think until somebody can really clarify, how that's supposed to be divided, it's going to be tough. And I don't see how you can do that without some sort of organized labor coming into play.
Yeah, because at that point, I mean, I think the best way to, and this, I'm not going to say I'm like some sort of finance major or law major, but I think probably the best way to get NIL really sorted out is to have a CBA and to have like an NCAAPA of sorts. But in order to even have, the Players Association and a collective bargaining agreement, they're probably going to have to be designated as employees. And even decades later, and even though amateurism is all but dead, I mean, the NCAA is not going to want to make everyone employees.
Well, as quiet as it's kept, I don't think the players would actually want to do that either. Just because that's a whole another animal. I mean, because now you can, cut, but they're doing that now. I mean, they're actually, look, if little Timmy is not, making the cut, they kind of encourage him to leave. And it's not like he can stomp his feet and say, I'm not leaving. They just make it very uncomfortable for you to stay. And so at the end of the day, they got to go. So I don't know. To me, it's a little sad, to be honest, because there's some things that I loved about the old, traditions, but they had to change. And the thing that people don't, where this was really fumbled on the NC2A standpoint. I mean, obviously they fumbled it from the get go because they just failed to realize that change was going to come. But COVID really exposed everything. COVID was the truth serum, because when COVID came out and people were dying and it was attributed to the disease, when it came to the TV contracts, they basically said, we need to play these games and we'll sequester the kids. Your parents can't come see games, but you're going to go and we're still going to have these games because we're not giving TV money back because the schools need it. And then you had, universities who were, I can tell you out here at USC, kids were still paying $65,000 a year to go to school and they never saw a classroom. And people are like, well, why are we paying $65,000? Well, we're learning at home. And it's like nothing changed. And you have, even out here in California, you still have a lot of online programs, and teachers will not go back to school because they're like, we're not going back. We're going to teach from home. And so it still has never recovered. I mean, so when you're looking at it from that angle, had the NC2A just said, you know what, it's too dangerous for the kids, we're not going to play, and they shut it down, you never would have been exposed to what we're exposed to now. And it probably never, we're probably looking at another 20 years of the same old stuff. But once they took the jump of these games are too important to the university, we're going to lose too much money, these kids need to play regardless, be damned if they're sick or not, they're going to play and we're going to keep them in their dorm rooms. Well, there you have it.
Yeah, it's been an interesting, exactly. It's been an interesting few years though to see some of the power dynamics switch back in the players' favor, and now everyone else trying to compensate for it. Last question, real quick, and then we'll get you out of here. Final one of the night. The quarterback position, you've been coaching that group for a long time now, so you've seen the evolution from the, of course, there's always been versatility in the position, dating all the way back to guys like Warren Moon and Randall Cunningham and Joe Montana, even Steve Young, these Jeff Garcia, all these guys that do a variety of things. But over the years, it's really transitioned from a pocket passer who stands in there, delivers the ball, your drop back passer. Then you've got, some of the mobile guys, and really this position has evolved now to where you get the Patrick Mahomes of the world. So as a guy who is very deep in the trenches here with this position, what is kind of the trend, or what is the kind of next phase of quarterbacks?
Well, I think the phase is already here, but I think what you're going to see, you're never going to see the Tom Brady's and the Peyton Mannings. And I don't mean that by their style, but just the length of play. I think the quarterback position now is a lot like what the running back position used to be. Now, the running back is, by committee, but the quarterback, they're looking for guys who can extend plays. And because of that, their injury risk exposure is heightened. And so careers won't last as long. And then also the formula for winning championships for the most part is if your quarterback is on a modest salary and you can, bring in talent that would support that, great defense, great running game, bring in all the other ancillary pieces that will and make him more just a guy that kind of is the final piece of the cog. If you can win in that kind of a structure, that's kind of how the quarterback position is being, dealt with now. So, I mean, look, Chicago Bears drafted Justin Fields, how many years ago was that? 3 years ago?
3 years ago,
3 years ago.
3 years ago? He's pretty much shipped out, right?
Yep.
I mean, hell, even when Robert Griffith Jr., the third, when he got drafted by the Redskins in the 4th round, they drafted Kirk Cousins. Right. So it's like, so there is, Josh Rosen was a 1st-round pick, and the next year they drafted Kyler Murray. So when you're asking about the position, I think the rookie salary cap has sort of changed how they look at it. It's not so detrimental if they draft a guy in round 1 and he doesn't work out.
Right.
And so, that's probably the biggest change. I think now they're a little bit more open to letting the quarterback take, a few more hits than normal, because they feel quite confident they can go get somebody else.
Yeah, and I think also, you mentioned it, but the development of quarterbacks coming out of college is more important than ever, because that rookie deal allows for you to build around them, right? You have that first 4 years essentially to build a team and to be able to kind of put stars around a quarterback and hope that you grab one of those rookie quarterbacks that's ready to go, or, really hits the mark quickly. So I would say that it's never been more important to be ready to go out of college, right? We've seen all these developmental guys like a Trey Lance. We've seen over the years, there's been plenty of quarterbacks that are projects that fail, and then some like a Josh Allen that hit. So it's really interesting to see just the general wave of the quarterback position and how all of that's kind of changing. Steve, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to join us. I know that lasagna it's time to reheat that. So we're apologizing in advance for keeping you from that. Okay. All right. So you're about ready then. You can go back and it's ready to go. But thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to talk to you, and hopefully we'll get to meet you in person when you're in here, up here in Louisville next time. So
for sure.
Well, until next time, ladies and gentlemen, go Cards.